Everybody, welcome to another edition of the Hot Seat Interview. I, of course, am your host, Leo Brady from AMovieGuy.com. I am really excited to be here today with a director who has just been turning out nothing but excellent work. Her last three films in a row. Her film before this was a film on Netflix called The Unforgivable with Sandra Bullock. And we're here today to talk about her new film starring Saoirse Ronan, which is called The Outrun. This is director Nora Fingscheidt. How are you today?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
Thank you for being with me. I like to start my interviews out by asking the person who I'm talking to if they could give me a movie or a movie experience that comes to mind for them that made them say, "Okay, I want to be a director. I want to make movies for a living."
Okay. This is gonna be quite embarrassing. But when I was, I guess, 11 years old, maybe 12 years old, I went to the movies with my hockey crew.
Yeah.
I was playing field hockey and we watched Titanic. And I
Love it.
got so upset that Jack died, that I was really mad. And there was the moment when I left the cinema and I'm like, who made that decision? Because I understood that it was just a movie
Yes.
and nobody had really died. But
Yeah.
then I started investigating, like, who are these person behind the film? Like somebody must have made that decision. And so I came like to this idea of I have to do that job, remake that film, and have Jack survive.
Wow.
It's like
I'm
the
hoping,
movie, the movie would be no success at all if he survived.
I don't know,
But
maybe.
now I know that.
Yeah.
That's what I understood later about filmmaking and storytelling. But yeah, unfortunately, I wish I could come up with something more intellectual, but that's the truth.
That's actually so funny too to hear you say in a lot of ways because because looking at your films, they're not exactly even ending happy as you would want it, as wanted Titanic to end happy. I mean, but your films do have complexities to it like that. And I love to like connect the dots between the movies that a director's made, like looking at their filmography. I mean, I look at like System Crasher, The Unforgivable, and now The Outrun. I mean, each film deals with women, different ages, different stages of life, and women that have either flawed pasts or searching for forgiveness in a way. So I guess my question is, what is it about these types of stories, these types of characters that draw you to telling these stories and making these films?
Mm. I think what I really what I really find interesting are people who are fighting their own demons in a
Yeah.
way. Those are the stories that sort of capture me or captivate me. I'm not so interested in stories where the good hero fights the evil villain.
Yeah.
It's important that we have those stories for kids and this idea of, oh yeah, there is good and evil in the world, but the truth is we as human beings have it all inside us. And so I tend to end up with stories about people who are their own antagonists in a
Yeah.
way. The fact that those are women of three different ages is really sort of coincidence because, I mean, with Benny from System Crash, I wasn't. It was a choice to make it a girl because I didn't want to feature the stereotype of the aggressive little boys.
Right.
And then Unforgivable and Outrun both, I was approached by actresses.
Yeah.
So it's kind of obvious that they're women, and
Right.
why shouldn't they be? So,
Yeah.
but there isn't really this choice of, oh, I want to just tell stories about female characters or anything like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, but it's interesting, but it is cool that you say that about like about the internal struggle because that's exactly what I picked up from the Outrun. I mean, so let me give you a little bit, this movie obviously is adapted from Amy Liptrott's book, but like for me, I like to be an open book and honest about a lot of things. I'm somebody who's 12 years sober, so I like really sort of felt a lot of impact from this movie. but there's a great balance of like Rona's chaotic past and her struggle to sort of find peace. Was finding that tone of that internal struggle and that authenticity, was it there in the book, or was it just the collaboration with what Amy wrote and then what Saoirse was going to put into the character?
I think it's there from the book,
Yeah,
honestly. I
yeah,
think the book is exactly that. It's this very true, brutally honest, truthful story about somebody writing about the process of recovery
yeah.
and not so much glorifying alcoholism or anything, but really telling the story about how tough recovery is. And it's not one day at a time. And for people from the outside, it's sometimes like, hey, you're 1 year sober. That's great. You made it. Get a life.
Right,
And for
right.
people in the situation, that is sometimes when the hardest part starts,
Yeah,
right? When the rehab is over and everything is settled, and you're like, oh God, now I'm in everyday life. How am I going to handle this?
right,
So, so the book is so rich. It started off as an internet blog. It's more like a collection of journal writing that it was more for us. The real work was to pick and choose and narrow it down so that it would fit into a feature film narrative
right.
because the book is so complex. It's almost unadaptable in a way. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I could picture that too. I mean, because like one thing, and I think this is a bit of an obvious question too. I always wonder how the relationship of the director and the lead actor sort of grows over time. But like, again, speaking from experience, I think what you nail in this film is the isolation. It's like there's almost like isolation where it feels like Rona is in the most quiet and most peaceful little calm locations off of these Scottish islands, but yet there's a lot of restlessness inside internally. So for you working with Saoirse, like now that I guess the film's completed, how did that relationship grow from, again, you're approached by her, but how did that relationship start at the beginning? It's obviously maybe you don't know much about each other. And then now that the film's out, I mean, there has to be, hopefully there's a friendship there at the end, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the process when you make a movie. It's a really close experience. And if you go to a tiny remote island, it's almost like you're doing this weird boot camp together as a team. There is definitely a team bonding aspect of the challenges of filming on remote islands. Although I must say, Saoirse as a personality is so easygoing and so fun and so open that she really she just opened this creative process from the very early get-go. And it was eye-to-eye level cooperation. And so, yes, we spent a lot of time together, but I think the mutual trust in terms of how are we embarking this journey and how can we communicate each other's needs in terms of what do I need in order to direct this film, what does she need in order to pull off the best performance she can.
Yeah.
That was very open from the very beginning, thanks to how she is as a human being.
Yeah, yeah. Well, she seems again. I watched another interview that the two of you had, and she was saying, "Oh, I'm turning 30," and I just was like, "Wait a minute!" Like she's so much mature for her age. She seems like she's just got everything under control, which is why I think this character for her almost maybe felt out of left field, maybe, or probably was the most challenging for her because she's always been somebody who's been in control of the character she wants to play or things of that nature. But there's a lot of sort of rockiness. There's a lot of fear, I bet, in playing a character like Rona.
Yeah, I mean, that is something that she would need to answer. It's hard for me to say on her behalf, but it's
Yeah,
definitely something she hasn't done before in this way.
yeah,
But it's something that she felt ready to jump on, and I think, yeah, she pulled it off. I mean, it's incredible what she does.
yeah. Well, and I too want to go back to like sort of talking about visually this film about how you know, shooting off of, Scotland's Orkney Island. Like, I mean, clearly it's gorgeous. It's beautiful to look at, but yet again, it's this subject of alcoholism. Can you sort of talk about sort of the plan that you had with your director of photography, Eunice Roy
Yes.
Emer? Like, because it does feel like you do a lot of shots of like waves and you do a lot of shots of like almost Saoirse's face when she's like lying in bed and really like in there, like getting close to sort of almost making it feel that intensity. Was that sort of the plan that you wanted to sort of, yes, it's set in gorgeous locations, but there's a lot of like chaos going on in these scenes.
Um, I mean, we always start from how can we tell the character's journey best, you know?
Yeah.
Where is she in that very moment? So the film has three layers, so to say. You know, there's the present tense, which is the Orkney layer, then the past that she remembers, which is the London layer, and then there is the what we call the nerd layer, which is
Yeah.
her brain and things she's interested about and reads about. Like because often, when you leave one addiction, you find another one. And
Yeah.
sometimes it's cold water swimming or sugar or whatever it is,
Yeah.
sometimes those are more, but if you are an addictive personality,
Yeah.
you will find it highly, or work or something can be something, you might find a more healthy substitute.
Yeah.
And so the nerd layer was important to sort of represent that because, again, that also comes from the book. And we thought, at first when she's in Orkney, she doesn't really want to be there. So Orkney at the beginning, honestly, is quite gray and dull and bland, and we don't see a lot of wide shots yet.
Right.
And London, her longing and her memory of, those happy days in London is vivid and colorful and bright. And then as the movie progresses and she sort of confronts her path and she comes to terms with what has happened and confronts the shame and everything, the memories of London become more disturbed and broken and fragmented,
Yeah.
whereas the more she arrives in Orkney and grounds herself,
Yeah.
the more beauty you are allowed to see because she sees it, the more the movie opens up. So in the end, it's almost like the two layers cross over. And then when she's on the tiny island, that is when you can finally hear all the waves and be immersed by the wind, and it
Right.
becomes more colorful. And so, yeah, I think usually we always start the visual question by how is she feeling? How is the main character feeling in that very moment? How can we tell that story with the camera?
Yeah. Yeah, well, and it's interesting too because you even sort of said it yourself. Like there have been plenty of films before that either like glorify alcoholism or try to approach the subject from either a standard level or a new level or a different angle. There's always these different ways, which is why it's such a great subject matter. But like for you, this felt very different for me. And you talked about the process of the like past, present, and what she's trying to or what she can and cannot remember. Um, but for you, like, are there any movies that you kind of are like, all right, I want to stay away from, whether it's a movie like Flight or there's a lot of movies about alcoholism. Honestly, it's like too many to reference. But like, is there certain sort of movies that you wanted to reference or think about when you're making a story like this or telling it your way?
Not so many stories about alcoholism or addiction. I always saw it as, I thought, well, okay, so the Orkney layer kind of was inspired by films like Nomadland
Yeah,
or Wuthering Heights or something. And then
yeah,
the London layer, I think, was inspired by something like I May Destroy You, if you've seen that.
yeah,
There is such a radicality to that character. She has such a great energy without ever victimizing herself. I find that really, really, truly a remarkable show. And the
yeah,
nerd layer was almost like an inspiration where we thought it needs to have like this Werner Herzogish, weirdness
yeah.
of, science meets philosophy meets,
Eh,
imagery. So kind of, it's almost like each layer has its own reference films, if that makes sense.
it does. I mean, it's hard not to see like Bergman films to see like through Glass Darkly or like, you know what I mean? It's kind of uh Seventh Seal, whatever. It's like those moments of peace where she's just standing on the shore or she's afraid to walk out into the water with the rest of the group that's out there. Like there's a lot of sort of introspective and I again that's why when you bring up like Herzog, it feels like this movie in many ways becomes one with nature at times. And I don't know if that was like entirely the goal, but it really did create such a beautiful sort of atmosphere for it. And I did appreciate that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So before we wrap up, I don't know how much of a big Saoirse Ronan fan you are. I am quite a big fan of hers. Brooklyn was like my number one film of the year that it came out. But her performances feel like they continue to top themselves. So if you had to pick between movies like Brooklyn, her performances of Brooklyn, Lady Bird, or here in the Outrun, which one are you taking? I mean, I'm assuming
Uh,
you're going to
I'm
be the
biased. I'm biased, so I'm not going to answer that
yeah.
question.
Well,
Okay.
I'm hoping she receives a lot of acclaim for this. I mean, this movie is really powerful and she's once again, turned out such a great performance.
I
So,
agree.
yeah. All right. And just to close out, it may be a cheesy last question, but like, what do you hope sort of audiences can take away from watching The Outrun? What's sort of your, ending, audience? I would think it's kind of the empathy thing, right? I mean, at least that's a lot what I always pick up from a great movie like this.
Yeah, and it really depends on the audience member. If you have a relationship with addiction of some sort, I hope that the story gives you hope and strength and encourages you, to keep on that journey of recovery. If you're somebody who has no relationship with it at all, I hope it creates some understanding of how tough of a process recovery is, and that it's not so easy like people may think from the outside. And I hope that people, I don't know, feel the need to go cold water swimming or, just research something about whatever. I think, yeah, there are many things to take away, but I do hope it creates understanding and empathy for people
Yeah.
who struggle.
Yeah. I love that. All right. Nora Fingscheidt, thank you so much for talking with me today. Love the
Thank
film.
you for having
Outrun.
me.
Yeah. The Outrun will be in theaters this weekend, October 4th. And we can't wait for everybody to see it. Congratulations and thanks again.
Thank you.
Yeah.